Hello, darkness, my old friend. I wasn't really sure I wanted to do another U.S. men's national team video. You'll notice I haven't done one in quite some time. Honestly. It's like watching a family member repeatedly make horrific life decisions and knowing that you have no control over what happens and you just have to sit and watch. And like, as a U.S. fan, you just go, why do I even care at this point? Like, why do I care? This video today will not be a tactical breakdown. I highly recommend you go listen to the Total Soccer Show's latest podcast. They put it out last night. I haven't listened to it because I wanted to come into recording this with my own ideas, but apparently it's long. It doesn't focus on fire everyone, and it's more of a focus, which is what they're really good at what went wrong tactically, rather than being caught up in the anger and result and stuff like that. They're pretty level-headed usually, so I'm curious to see what that sounds like. So I'm going to recommend you go listen to that. They're a great show. I absolutely love the Total Soccer Show. Daryl and Taylor are amazing, so go listen to that after you finish watching this. So no, my friends, I'm going to sit here in anger and let them handle the tactics. That's what I'm here for. I was somewhat proud last night of Ian Darke and Taylor Twellman, the ESPN2 commentators. They're kind of if it's on ESPN, those two are the ones that are going to be calling the game. And they were pretty harsh in both leading into halftime and then the last 15, 20, 25 minutes of the game. They were honest about how poor the U.S. looked and so on. They weren't calling for Berhalter's head or anything like that, but it is the first time since the same Taylor Twellman did the "what are we doing here" rant the night that Trinidad and Tobago beat the United States and knocked them out of the 2018 World Cup or World Cup qualification. So it's ironic, or is it ironic in like the actual literature sense, that it's been almost exactly 2 years since that debacle in Trinidad that you've heard national broadcasters bringing some fire towards the U.S. men's national team. And I think that's unique. I don't think it's a turning point necessarily, but it's different because up until this point we've heard we got to be patient, like they're installing a system. You know, we went 14 months with Dave Sarachan in charge, so Greg essentially just got here, blah, 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 blah. So it's the first time you've heard from an MLS/Soccer United marketing partner in ESPN some actual like hefty criticism. And it was like, it almost got a little annoying to listen to as a fan. You're like, I know we're terrible. Like, can we talk about something else? But that's how much they were talking about it on a national broadcast here in the States. And I think that could be starting to change, right? Like you're seeing more media ask questions and articles coming out about how nothing's changed and so on. So they did focus a lot on the historical stats about the matchup between the U.S. and Canada and how it was breaking, decades-long droughts of scoring, like Canada even scoring against the U.S. and obviously winning, and so on. And I don't really believe you should be upset about some of the stats. They were repeated almost ad nauseum. Like I said, it was kind of like, okay, we get it. Like they said over and over, they haven't scored against the U.S. in 11 years, and they haven't beaten the U.S. in like 34 years or something like that. So let me kind of walk through those examples. And again, I don't think you should be upset about the stats. I honestly don't think the stats matter, which I thought was kind of a weird thing for them to focus on, right? So they said, Canada hasn't beat the United States since 1985. So it's the first time since 1985. And that is a long time, but the focus is when you put it in the number of years, it does seem worse. I'm not trying to discount, like it's bad. Like let me back that up first. Like it's bad. I'm going to give you reasons why it's actually bad. Versus like, hey, let's focus on the number of years. Like, hey, it's been since I was born, that Canada's beaten the United States. In those 35 years, the US and Canada have only played 18 times. That's once every other year. And only 8 of those games are competitive games that actually matter, right? Like 10 friendlies, whatever, but like you tend to experiment in friendlies and, whatever. So there's only been 8 competitive games since 1985. Again, I'm not saying that makes it better, but it 35 years sounds a lot worse than like this is the first time they've won in 8 competitive matches or 9 or whatever it is. And it also, in those 8 and 18 games, the competitive and then all fixtures total, it's not like the United States has just like whipped Canada like they did Cuba a couple days ago, like a week ago in the CONCACAF Nations League. It's not like every single game was 7-0 and it's like, oh, this is a travesty, right? Obviously, I've not watched all those games. Like, they may have whipped them on the field, but the scoreline, if you just look at the scorelines, which is what I've done, in those 18 games, there's a bunch of 0-0 draws. There's a couple 1-0, 2-0. There's a 2-1. The biggest scoreline is a 4-0 win by the U.S. in a friendly in 2003, but again, that's a friendly. And then the U.S. beat Canada twice in the 1997 World Cup, 3-0, both times, which I think is kind of interesting. But the most common result, 6 of the 18 total games, including friendlies, is a 0-0 draw. One of those turned into a victory for the U.S. because it went to penalties in the CONCACAF Gold Cup, but it was still a 0-0 draw in regular and extra time, right? So it's not like, to me, it's not like pure domination, and it's not like they've met every single year, twice a year, and it's, whatever. It does make it more dramatic to focus on the number of years versus the number of like competitive fixtures, in my opinion. Now, again, I'm not saying it makes it any better. I'm just saying that makes it seem a lot worse than going like, well, in 9 games they've won 1 or 2 or whatever. The scoring a goal for the first time in 11 years, for starters, it's been 12 years. I was very confused by that when I looked it up. The last time Canada scored against the U.S. was in the Gold Cup of 2007. And it was a 2-1 victory by the U.S., but it's 2007. It's 2019. It's actually been more than 12 years, because it was the summer of 2007. But who cares if they scored? What matters is the result. On top of that, considering the U.S. didn't score last night, they had only scored 1 goal, the U.S., in the previous 3 meetings with Canada. So there's 2, and again, that's friendlies, 2 0-0 draws, and a 1-0 win. All in friendlies. So it's not like the U.S. is coming in and be like, hey, over the last 4 times we played them, we beat them 7-0, right? It was 2 0-0 draws and a 1-0 win, all in friendlies. So the fact that, yes, Canada scored for the first time in 12 years, it's the number of fixtures is more important, and the number of competitive games is most important. So I don't think the stats matter all that much. What I think you should be upset about, and I haven't put out a video in a long time because I'm just kind of tired. I'm just kind of tired of being a U.S. fan right now. And I know there's probably people out there that are like, I'm the fan of a smaller country in Europe, and we never qualify, and like, suck it up, Buttercup, right? But it's just, again, it goes back to seeing what most people. It's not just like I think I'm the best thing that's ever happened to football. Obviously, I'm not. I don't coach a team or anything like that. But when folks in the media that have been covering the team for a long time, and you can kind of see there's some pretty simple things that have gone wrong, and knowing you have no control over that is really frustrating. Like, you can't influence any of this that's going on. Although, I enjoyed some of the like Stu Holden, who is on the Athletes Council that voted to bring in Carlos Cordero as the next president. Put out his comments last night, and then immediately got flamed by a bunch of people for going like, hey, remember when you were on the Athletes Council and you voted for more of the status quo? No response to that, which I thought was kind of interesting. So here's what I think you should be upset about, or maybe feeling helpless about. I'm not sure what it's like. It's like a mix of emotions. I'm not sure what it is. You should be feeling helpless that the U.S. played with no heart, and that's despite Pulisic apparently playing with flu-like symptoms. But when the ESPN reporter ran onto the field last night at the end of the game and stuck a microphone in Berhalter's face, his first response was like, we lost a lot of 50-50 balls, as if that was the problem. I think it contributed that they played like they had zero heart. Like, the U.S. has always been tactically deficient, maybe talently deficient in comparison to the Mexicos and obviously everyone above Mexico in the world, not just in CONCACAF. But they've had grit, and they've been able to grind out results and like never quit and like play hard. The U.S. did not have that last night. I think you could be upset about that. And I think you can be upset about that because that is the personality of the coach, in my opinion. Berhalter is There was a guy I'm pulling up. There's a journalist, Charles Boehm. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but he's written for ESPN and all over the place. Tweeted last night. I think it was actually at halftime. Teams tend to reflect the outlook, and I'm going to try and put it up here. I'm going to remember to do that for sure. Teams tend to reflect the outlook and personality of their coaches, and I'd say that applies to the U.S. men's national team and Berhalter for better and for worse. Cerebral, hardworking, but also stubborn, dogmatic, and so concerned with being level-headed that they look overly placid when fire is needed. And that's what you saw last night. I think you saw, and I'm going to talk about this, the U.S. team is thinking too much. They're not relying on instincts or reactions or whatever. And that leads to them not going like 100%. And the coach on the sideline is like, he's like, you could see like the wheels every time they cut over to Berhalter in the second half, the wheels are spinning. But there's no like losing your mind to like get your team to wake up. I would have loved to see what happened at halftime, like what the team talk was like. But from outsiders' perspective, people outside of the team, it appears that it's like we're trying to be level-headed. Taylor Twellman and Ian Dark said last night, you know, Berhalter wants them to be calm under pressure, and so like there's nothing wrong with that, right? When someone is running at you, to be calm under pressure and find the pass and get past that pressure. But it appears from the outside looking in to bleed into we're not really worried about this. It's just the CONCACAF Nations League. We're just losing 1-0 away from home in Canada in an MLS stadium that one of our players plays in as a home venue. Like, this is not like difficult away game, right? And that's another thing I'll try and remember to put up there is one of the things when we failed to qualify, I said the U.S. needs to play more away games. This is before the Nations League was even a thing. We look completely uncomfortable playing anywhere in CONCACAF away from home. And so the fact that we can't do that in Toronto, which is like, right, like a little different from Trinidad and Tobago and Guatemala and wherever, right? So that's the first thing you should be upset about is they seem to have played with zero heart. And that is probably harsh, right? Like I'm just some dude sitting at home. I'm not training. I'm not out there. But the number of 50-50 balls that we did not win, and that led straight to counterattacks, was atrocious. You can be upset or feeling helpless about that the U.S. seemed incapable of stringing 3 passes together. Like literally 3 passes. And I think that goes back to overthinking it. Like they're thinking, again, I'm not there. This could be completely wrong, but my take on this is like, okay, I've received the ball. I'm supposed to pass it to somebody versus relying on your instinct. You don't have time to think like that. Instead of relying on your instincts and doing whatever the natural soccer or football, depending on your preference, move is. And that goes back to people railed against me when I said I didn't like Berhalter as a hire because he's got a 38% win ratio as a coach before taking over the national team. Oh, he's got this amazing system. It's a system. It's a system. Well, you don't have time to implement a system. And this is indicative of that to me, is we get together every couple months, right, to bring a team together. Okay, we got to implement the system, which also leads to not changing out players a lot because it's like, well, if you've had the last 4 lessons, if you look at it that way, to understand the system, if somebody new comes in, they've got to learn not only the last 4 lessons, but the 5th lesson all at once. And that's why you see, I think, more of, hey, we're bringing Will Trapp and Jossie Zardes over and over and over because they already understand the system because they played for him at Columbus. You could see so many times last night where a player received the ball and was like doing this, and then while thinking about where to pass it, gets dispossessed. Or while they're holding onto the ball, they've got a guy in their back and 2 other Canadian players start closing them down because that's their job, and they get dispossessed because they couldn't find a pass. You can be upset that even a tiny bit of pressing by any opponent completely tears this amazing system apart. And you saw the cracks in the foundation in the Gold Cup against Curacao. They were pressing and doing a really good job, and it was causing problems for the United States. Where like we seemed incapable or unwilling to go like, okay, they are closing down our back line. We're just going to hoof it long to somebody tall. and I'm not saying you always want to play long ball, but like we seem incapable. Canada pressed last night, and it wasn't like Liverpool gegenpressing, but they pressed. Like we would have the ball. There was multiple times we had the ball in the attacking third, and next thing you know, it's at midfield, and then it's at our defensive line, and like they just kept pressing, and all of a sudden we're passed back to the goalkeeper, and then he's punting it, and we're losing that ball too. Like we seem unable to get around to press. Going back to the passing, it like people can throw flack and say the U.S. men's national team isn't made up of like the highest elite level footballers. That's fair. We don't have that many players playing in Europe at high levels. Like Pulisic's not even starting for Chelsea. That's like the classic thing people say. But they know how to complete 3 passes. Like they are capable. If you watch any of their club games, they're capable of completing 3 passes, except when they play for the U.S. Why is that? Think about that. You can be upset about and feeling helpless about the losses, not just to Canada. Canada is just a further symptom of a disease, in my opinion. But the losses to Venezuela, Jamaica, and Canada, and then the trouble we faced with Curaçao's press. That, to me, like, there are multiple cracks in the foundation, and we are past the point of, like, well, we're learning. Like, I want to see Greg Berhalter in a press conference mad. He doesn't apparently get mad. Well, we're still evaluating players. And that goes back to, you'd be upset that it took the chief operating officer of U.S. Soccer, who hired his brother with a 38% win ratio and his coaching career, and how that hire took 14 months. Those 14 months, my friends, invaluable in implementing this amazing system. Right? We had the lost year where we had Dave Sarachan. It was like, hey, Dave, here's a pile of players. We're trying to put out some fires here and still make money as a federation. Good luck. Again, I did a video about this. That period of time was lost. Like, you would have been, in my opinion, better off finding another. It doesn't, not that it doesn't matter. It's not like you can hire any coach, but that year of lost, not having a coach in place and just throwing players out there to play France in a friendly, right, in the warm up to the World Cup, was critical time if you're going to have a system-based system, right? Like hey, it's not just like throw the best players out there, we'll figure it out tactically, but like we have this system, we do this. All those games we played are lost in 2018 because you didn't have somebody in charge, because it took 14 months to do it. And I do think fondly back to some of the videos that I'm going to try and link up here, because I got so many comments saying essentially I was an idiot that I couldn't see how amazing Greg Berhalter was as a coach. You can be upset or feeling helpless about that the general manager that took so long to hire Greg Berhalter, because it took so long to hire him, just got promoted, my friends, despite zero progress on the pitch. Didn't win the Gold Cup, lost to Venezuela and Jamaica leading up to this, just lost to Canada. That guy, Ernie Stewart, just got promoted. Are you serious? You could be upset or feeling helpless about, this is almost the last one, that the staff inside of the U.S. Soccer Federation are waging a Glassdoor.com resistance campaign by writing honest reviews about how terrible the Federation is run in hopes of avoiding Jay Berhalter, the COO and brother of Greg Berhalter that hired him, in hopes of avoiding him becoming the CEO, because our CEO is stepping down because he's, served his bajillion years. The staffers inside the organization have been saying, like, we got problems. We got lots of problems here, people. Lots of problems on Glassdoor.com. That's bad. But most of all, you should be distraught that you don't live in a footballing and soccer nation where heads would roll after results against not just Canada. Again, it's not just the Canada result. I don't know if any other country would be like, well, you lost to Canada, everyone's fired. But the results against Venezuela, Jamaica, and Canada, when you're helping opponents you have historically done well against, break records after decades-long droughts. And not only nothing happens, but the people involved are getting promoted. That, my friends, is something worth being upset about. So, I'd love to hear your polite, well-thought-out comments below. How would you fix the U.S. men's national team? Do you even think it needs fixing? Does it just need more time? Do we just need to, put the cake back in the oven for a little bit longer? Whatever it is. Was this just a bad night in Canada? Or is it simply the fact that Greg missed out on an entire year's worth of friendlies to help install his system and he just needs more time? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Again, polite, well thought out. Everything else will get deleted. Hit that subscribe button over there if you're new. Hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video. And we'll see you in the comments. Have a good one.